What's up, everyone? It's Johnny here with the Soulful Hunter podcast. Going to do a little shout out for all you men out there and challenge you and ask you if you are looking for ways to go deeper and be around a group of men who are looking to find personal empowerment, emotional freedom, and redefine the legacy that you'll leave, then listen up. The Vulnerable Heroes Men's Retreat Weekend has 6 spots open for their VH2 class of guys. What to expect during these weekends is 2 4-day retreats that are 90 days apart. Participants must attend both to be able to join. You're going to be in a beautiful location of the Cascade Mountains, 2 hours outside of Seattle, Washington. You're going to be in small group coaching, go through exercises, personal growth sessions, and storytelling. Lodging, food, and activities such as fishing, hiking, games, and much, much more are included. You're going to be able to leave these weekends with the development of your personal legacy plan. You're going to have weekly group accountability check-ins, monthly coaching with trainer and coach Lucas Mack, membership to the private Vulnerable Hero Legacy community, and just be able to dig deeper within your own soul. For more information, go to www.lucasmack.com/retreats. That's LUCASMACK.com/retreats, so that you can find out more about the Vulnerable Heroes weekends and start to develop to become your own vulnerable hero. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Soulful Hunter podcast. I am your host, Johnny Mack. Through this podcast, I am on a mission to transform lives through primal adventure and to spread my mission of mentorship is conservation. This podcast is powered by Washington Backcountry, a resource for all hunters new and old. To find out more about Washington Backcountry, go to wabackcountry.com or search for Washington Backcountry on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Soulful Hunter podcast. I am your host, Johnny Mack. Today we have a wonderful guest and a wonderful human being on the show. His name's Robbie Kroger, and Robbie is the founder of Blood Origins. And if you're unfamiliar with Blood Origins, it is a show on YouTube as well as Amazon Prime, and it is all about dedicating and inspiring and reigniting the hunting heritage in America. So we're going to dive into what the hunting narrative is all about and talk to Robbie about him and his story and why he started Blood Origins and what his purpose is behind it. So Robbie, thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate you joining and having you on here. So how you doing?
Man, we're good. Thank you, Johnny. I appreciate the introduction. We're always humbled to be on people's podcasts, talk about our project, and yeah, we're pretty good. It's as everybody jokingly says, it's getting close to my bedtime. I'm an early to bed kind of guy and an early riser, but yeah, appreciate you having me on.
I love it. Well, this is actually Robbie's and I's second time trying to record this podcast. We are a few weeks after my brand new born third son, and Robbie may be early to bed, early to rise, but I'm like always up with my newborn. So,
well, hey, man, you know what causes that? So,
right, nothing good happens after midnight, right?
That's right. It's funny. I don't know if you've ever done this, but my wife and I had a rule, and the rule was anything we say to each other between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. doesn't count.
I've heard that before. You know, just like chalk it up to being tired. I love it.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
So, Robbie, take us through Blood Origins. Take us from the very beginning, why you created it, what it is all about, and what's your mission and purpose with getting the show out there.
Yeah, so Blood Origins is Blood Origins started as it started with actually 3 words or 4 words. It's in your blood. It's in the blood. It was a phrase penned to me by my grandfather, typewritten on a rice piece of paper in 1992. At the time, I was 16 years old. I was living in South Africa. I had obviously expressed some interest in hunting to him. Johannesburg, South Africa at the time, 8.5 million people. I really didn't understand hunting. If you had asked me at that time, what is your why about hunting, or what is hunting, I probably could have told you, well, I think it's, go out and killing animals kind of thing. But hunting wasn't a part of my life. It was just the stories that my grandfather had written and the trophies on the wall. And my grandfather immigrated to Mozambique in the 50s from Germany, lived the heyday of African hunting, and in the 20s and 30s lived essentially the heyday of hunting in China, northern China, the Mongolian steppe, and Siberia. So hunting was essentially, he was born and raised a hunter. He was a hunter-gatherer by necessity at one point in his life. And so hunting was just a part of him. And me growing up in South Africa, it wasn't a part of me, except through stories and except through trophies on the wall. And so fast forward to this letter, and this letter, was to me, I'd expressed some interest in hunting in South Africa, and it didn't come to fruition, unfortunately. And fast forward about 20 years, I land up in America doing a PhD in biology. I'm a wetland ecologist by training, so I have a conservation restoration bend to who I am. And Mississippi, where I currently reside and have lived since 2003, sort of started scratching at that thing that was buried in my blood, which was hunting. And 10 years on now, or actually 15 years on now, I've gone through the progression of hunting like most hunters do, and I've got 2 young boys, and so I started really thinking about it all ties to that evolution of a hunter, right? I went through all the evolutions of a hunter in my, from 26 to 32 versus somebody in the US would have been going through them from 5 years old to 26 years old kind of thing. And so
let me jump in real quick. I want to
go ahead.
What is the evolution of a hunter?
Well, I think that when
you're 5 years, listeners through that.
Yeah. So when I think here growing up in the States, when you're 5, you're pretty much just shooting whatever you want to shoot. And that's what I was doing, right? It was when I started hunting, it was like, it didn't matter what it was going to get killed. And so once that happens, then you start engaging this fever around hunting. And so you want to hunt more and you want to kill more. And then once you've done that, then you've satiated that thirst, then it's almost like, okay, you want to find the biggest animal. And so you want to go chase that biggest animal and you find it and you kill it. Then it's about finding lots of big animals. Then it's about the experience rather. And like, okay, I've accomplished everything I wanted to accomplish. Now I'm after something different. And then sort of that's the evolution of who we are as hunters. But it doesn't necessarily have to be that way because of the narrative that you are born into. And so I think that's what's important to me. And that's why I was so focused on building Blood Origins, in that I've got 2 young boys now, 7 and 6. And I really wanted them to grow up, 1, understanding what hunting is, 2, understanding who they were based on their family and the familial heritage of hunting, and 3, that there's a different way that you can be raised a hunter, which is tied to respect, tied to gratitude, not tied to, just this wanton killing of an animal. So I'm very purposeful in when I take my boys hunting, that, that we're not killing everything. Not killing everything, but we're not going out there and the first deer we see, we're killing it. Or they're seeing lots of deer and we kill a lot of deer in a season. I've taken my boys hunting 2 deer seasons now, and we live in coastal Mississippi, which has a very, very low density of deer. And we've maybe seen 3 deer, and I've yet to kill a deer in front of them. And so and purposely so from my end, I've put them in a situation where I want them to understand and learn who they are as hunters, but then I'm also growing men, right? I'm growing these boys into men, and I want them to understand values like patience and perseverance and discomfort, and respecting life and understanding what we're doing and why we're doing it. And so that's important to me. And so take all of those things that I just explained. That's essentially why I built Blood Origins. Blood Origins represents us as a hunting community in a different light. It's there to reach across the aisle to the non-hunting mainstream American that, if your listeners don't know, essentially allows us to maintain our hunting lifestyle. And I say that, and people are going to go, well, nobody allows us to do anything. We can do whatever we want. Well, unfortunately, that's not true. In that America is about 330 million people, I think, 350 million people. And 5% or 4% now of that population is hunters. And so when you look at the general block of voting in this country, you've got about a 200 to 250 million voter block that really don't have an opinion of hunting one way or another. And so we want to keep that opinion of in that block of hunting in a positive light. And so that's what Blood Origins is. Blood Origins is this perception driving narrative to the non-hunting mainstream audience to say what you think you know about what you think you know a hunter is supposed to be represented as is false. This is what hunters are. This is the emotional side. This is the heart side. This is the heritage side. This is the conservation side. This is the 95% of who a hunter is, with the 5% being us pulling the trigger and releasing the arrow.
Yeah. It's really interesting the perspective in which us hunters have of ourselves, but also what the rest of the world has of hunters, and specifically Hollywood, and how hunters are portrayed in movies and shows, and the different ways of being that hunters can be.
Yeah,
it's constantly funny challenging.
Yeah, I've got a next door neighbor that just built a house, and it's been there probably a year and a half. And when I first told him I was a hunter and I was taking the boys hunting, I was like, "What? I can't believe you're doing that." And even I saw him on Sunday. The boys were fishing, and I had a whitetail backstrap marinating at home, and Mr. Jim came up and we started talking, and I said, "Leo, I'll tell Mr. Jim what we're having for dinner." And he goes, "Oh, we're gonna barbecue out." And he goes, "Oh, what are you barbecuing?" He goes, "White-tailed deer." And this is my 7-year-old. And Mr. Jim was like, "Oh, I don't eat Bambi." That was his response, right?
Right.
And I said, "Well, why don't you eat?" "Oh, no, I don't think it tastes good." And I said, "Well, let me cook it for you. I guarantee it tastes good." And it was all about the taste to him. It wasn't so much that he was a vegetarian. He eats meat. There was this perspective of Hollywood and hunting and not tasting good.
Yeah. The concept of the gaminess within wild meat is something that just like messes with people's minds. They don't even know what it tastes like, and yet they have this preconceived idea of, oh, that's gamey, that won't taste good.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt.
This last school year, I had the privilege and honor to feed my entire staff, and I made a bunch of elk taco meat. And I put it out for everyone to enjoy. And you honestly, after the taco seasoning was over top of it, like you couldn't even tell the difference of what it was. But I had a fellow teacher know that it was elk, and they put out a sign saying elk meat. And it really turned people off from it. And so there was elk meat, and then there was ground turkey, and all the ground turkey disappeared, and I was left with all this extra elk meat, which, you never want to waste any of that wild game that you've taken. Mm-hmm. But ultimately I was like, doggone it, I had an opportunity to feed these people and them not have any idea of what it was. Not that I'm trying to trick them, but mm-hmm. if they would have never known, they never would have asked. And then you could come back and say, man, you just had elk. What'd you think? Without them thinking that it's elk beforehand, and then all of a sudden be like, well, I thought it tasted kind of gamey. Like you would have had no clue.
Right, 100%. 100%.
So it was a tough one to swallow, but it was a perfect opportunity for me to be an ambassador and an advocate for hunting and to really dive into conversations with people about wild game.
Yeah, we just need to take every opportunity we can, and I think it's just the way that we interact, right? It's almost the rhetoric of the country right now, which is, unfortunately, you can't have differing opinions and still be friends.
Right.
And it's just, that's how we got to approach hunting, and just say, hey, this is what we believe in, and this is what the science is saying, this is what the facts are saying, and this is what hunters do for conservation, and this is who we are. And unfortunately, there's always going to be a sector of our hunting community, or any community, that's going to be to the far left, and they're not going to represent you and I, and just there's nothing we can do about it. And they'll give us a black eye, and they'll portray us badly, and somebody will take them and generalize it across our entire community. Hey, it's just, you're going to have to deal with that. And we just keep pushing good narrative, good content, good ideas, good messages. And you slowly but surely drown those kind of, it's sort of like a moniker, a bad rap moniker against hunting, essentially. And
right.
I've started thinking about it a little more, and I've come up with a phrase that it sort of says, forget the motivation, focus on the consequence. And what that means is, you're going to have people go to Africa and are motivated to kill a bunch of stuff. No doubt.
Yeah.
That's their motivation. We can't change the motivation. Doesn't matter. At the end of the day, let's focus on the consequence. So what's the consequence of those guys going over there and hunting? The consequence is economic uplift. The consequence is jobs. The consequence is the plowing of thousands of US dollars into an economy that has no other viable option for saving wildlife other than hunting. Many consequences.
Speak into African hunting. Because just recently in the news, another picture of the Jimmy John's founder popped back up with him with the elephant that he shot, and like this giant uproar. So speak into what African hunting is all about. Yet we're not supposed to hunt elephants, but this guy did. And how does it work? And how does a lion end up getting shot? Cecil and the different things. Yeah.
No, 100%. So. It's obviously not as simple. It's pretty complicated, but let me try and see if I can dissect it out for you and the listeners. So typically the argument is, let's use elephants and let's use lions and let's use leopards. Let's use the charismatic species that everyone says is quote unquote endangered, right? So if those animals were truly, truly endangered, i.e. the population dynamics were at such a point where experts agree that any loss in that population would cause an irrevocable decrease in the population, you wouldn't be able to hunt it.
Right. That makes sense.
If they're not endangered, which they're not, in terms of them either being put on a CITES Appendix 1 or CITES Appendix 2, and that's either threatened or vulnerable populations, you've got to look at the population as a whole. All right. So elephants as a whole, their populations are either not sustaining, i.e. they're going down. And the only reason a population of elephants is going down is because it's getting poached. Right. It's not because it's getting hunted. Hunting quotas, typically in countries where the elephant populations is sustaining, or elephant populations are increasing, those elephant quotas typically are 0.5 to 0.9 or even 1% of the population. So if you think about that, right, that's 1% of a population, 10,000 animals, 1% of 10,000 animals is maybe 100 animals, right?
Yeah, right.
And so of that 100 animals that are being taken, it's typically a quota. Sometimes the quota isn't fulfilled. Sometimes the quota is fulfilled. But the balance...
Right, there's carryover and carrying capacity and all that.
That's right. And so for the most part, where people are hunting elephants, the value that is put on that animal is either, from an elephant's perspective, it's ivory, i.e., that's valuable to the black market, and so it's going to go in, it's going to get poached. The value is the meat. Well, elephants typically aren't the easiest things to hunt, and so the local African communities would not hunt elephants for meat. They wouldn't illegally poach them for meat. That's what, they're typically plains game hunting. The only other value that you can put onto elephants is either an ecotourism value, and typically associated with ecotourism value is comfort. And so if you think about where are the ecotourism meccas in Africa, South Africa, almost a first world country and a third world country, a first world country and a third world continent. You're talking the Masai Mara, you're talking about the Serengeti, you're talking about Tanzania, really well-known ecotourism places that cater to a tourist coming in and doing photographic safaris and living almost the lap of luxury, even if they're in tents.
Mm-hmm.
Where hunting of elephants, the last value is the hunting of the elephant. So, hunters coming in paying $50,000 or $80,000 for an elephant. Well, first, when you compare that dollar amount to what an ecotourist brings in, based on the research that I've seen, it takes 26 ecotourists to fulfill the same amount of money that has been put into Africa by one hunter.
Mm.
So, but taking that statistic out of the picture, where you're hunting elephants is typically malaria infested, tsetse fly infested. It's uncomfortable. It's hot. It's everything that us hunters love that ecotourists don't, right?
Right.
And so that population is strictly controlled. The quota is strictly allocated by science and by the government researcher. The money is plowed into the economy. It's used to buy. It's used to pay for jobs. It's used to pay for schools, medical supplies, you name it. Things that these communities typically would never see. So, what happens, unfortunately, is the anti-hunting community has a very, very loud voice, and they have a lot of stroke, essentially, in the Hollywood glitzy type arena, and they get the exportation, as we've seen a couple of bills going through Washington. They see the exportation of elephant trophies out of Zambia being banned, essentially. Well, if a hunter can't go to Africa and he can't harvest an elephant for $80,000 and he's not allowed to then bring the tusks back, what do you think's going to happen?
I have no idea. He's going to be really upset. Not many people are going to start hunting there anymore.
He's not going to hunt there anymore.
Right.
And so what happens when you don't hunt there anymore?
You lose all that money.
Ecotourism's not coming in to fill the void. You've now all of a sudden, the worst thing that happens, and this is the consequence of bans, right? The consequence of increased regulation, the consequence of not allowing these resources to be flown or taken out of the country, is that the value of the animal, it all comes down to the value. What does the animal's value represent? Well, now that elephant doesn't represent anything. It actually is a nuisance animal now because there's no hunters pressuring the population. And there's something to be said there in that hunters and outfitters in an area, elephants are wary of humans, right? They don't want to interact with humans. But when there's not, And then they're just going to raid the crop fields. Imagine,
Right. That's hard to stop.
yeah, you can't stop that. And so then what's going to happen? Oh, we're just going to, oh, there's a little poaching syndicate down the way that they're looking for ivory. We're going to let them know that there's a bunch of elephant here that they can come shoot because we don't want them there.
Right. So is like hunting elephants, I know this is like, I'm going to tie this back to Blood Origins here in just a second, but ultimately the concept is that people think it's illegal to hunt elephants.
Correct.
It is only in certain countries. So
it depends on the country, obviously. Yeah, it depends on just like the United States, right? Is it legal to hunt elk everywhere in the United States?
No.
Exactly. It's the same situation. Just think of the regulations are going to be set by the individual countries and then the individual government agencies that are in charge of the wildlife resource.
See, this is beautiful. What I love talking to you about this for is because you are an advocate and ambassador for the hunting community. And through Blood Origins, you are doing that. And you bring a perspective which I would say a majority of people do not have. And you can speak on things in ways that other people can't. So that's why I want to dive into some of that. So let's go more into, we're talking about putting the price on an animal. We're talking about, you being able to teach your kids and respect the animal and the price and the cost of what it is. So take us more of how did you end up getting into Blood Origins? Like, what was the thing that actually kickstarted you and being like, I have to do something for this?
Man, a lot of people have asked me that question, and I was talking to my wife about it, and I don't know, it was just this. I was not enamored by what I was seeing on outdoor television. That was the only place that I was getting my interactions with hunting, and then I wasn't seeing any stories. I wasn't seeing people telling us their true story, essentially. And so I felt like the storytelling aspect of who we are as hunters, which is almost a tradition that is, dare I say, buried in our blood too, as well as hunting, was being eroded by some pretty awful outdoor television that was supposed to represent who we were as hunters. And so
this concept of sitting around a campfire and sharing your adventures, that is what hooks the next generation.
Yeah, and doing it in such an authentic way, right? That you're just on pins and needles, or you're just trying to figure out what's going to happen next, or listening to this and just being completely consumed, and you could feel yourself in that place, in that moment, as that person describes that hunt. But the thing is, this is what sort of propelled us into Blood Origins, is that in that storytelling medium, whether it be a campfire, whether you're sitting at the feet of your grandfather, or you're chatting with your buddy after a hunt. How much of that conversation is about, oh man, that animal died like this, and then I killed it like this, and then I was so I just wanted to see the blood being drawn from it. None of it's like that.
None.
It's all about how hard it was, and the crazy stuff that happened, and the people you met, and the relationships that you formed, and it's all about that. And maybe it was man, and then we got to the top, and there was the animal, and I had to settle myself, and I pulled the trigger, and once we'd done that, it was there was 98% of that story was not about the animal dying, but rather about the adventure of you, and the adventure of the place, and the adventure of the people.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted to get back to.
Yeah, I can speak directly into that, because just this last week, I was able to fill a second deer tag here in the state of Washington that is on an island that is all but for maybe 200 200 square miles, maybe less than that, that's the only public land, and that public land's not even open to hunting except for 2 weeks in October. And so I was able to make connections with landowners, and I was able to take a deer on this guy's property who I've never even met in person until that morning. And the person in which he wasn't even a hunter. He was like, yeah, I've thought about getting into hunting. And so then once we got to know him and he gave us a tour of his land, and we ended up shooting the deer, and he came and watched us break it down. The story is in everything else. Yes, ultimately I shot it with an arrow and it died, but my heart was racing. What was it like being on someone else's property? What was it, the adventure was still there. It's not always just the pursuit of the animal. And I think people are missing that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. No, but I think the narrative's changing. I think the tide is changing. If you look across social media, I think a lot of people are starting to, tell stories with their pictures, tell stories with their comments, be the narrative changes that we all should be. And that's, to me, that's super encouraging.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. So what has hunting done for your life? You talk about the story of your grandfather leaving you a typed letter, but when you started hunting, what did it invoke in you?
When I started hunting, it didn't invoke anything in me, because I was just that, I was that naive, if it's brown, it's down kind of, type of hunter. But now, this project is forcing me to explore my why daily. And it's funny how, you get enamored by people going sheep hunting, you get enamored by people going elk hunting. And don't get me wrong, all of that fascinates me beyond belief. But I'll tell you, the idea of going and hunting something that has almost like, a lot of the antis use and level the argument against you. That is, let's level the playing field. Let's give the animal the gun, or, something crazy like that. Mm-hmm. And I've started almost hunting. I went and chased a buffalo in the Northern Territory of Australia, and I chased a buffalo in Argentina last year. And I did it the way my grandfather would have hunted buffalo in Africa, which is a large caliber rifle, no scope, open sights. And so you have to you don't have
very close.
I choose to get into bow range to interact with that animal. And you're interacting with an animal that, if you don't do your job, he's got just as good a chance of killing you as you do killing him. Mm-hmm. And it changes the dynamics.
Yeah.
It changes what hunting means. And to me, it's a leveling of the playing field. It's me testing my hunting ability against these dangerous game. It's me trying to figure out how to do it properly, because if I don't do it properly, then there's huge consequences on the line. It's also connecting to something raw, right? It's something like it's what all us hunters see and feel, regardless if a doe steps out, and that still happens to me today. Like a doe steps out, and it's that adrenaline coursing through your veins, through your blood, through your soul, that keeps you coming back for more. And I think that's the why, right? Honestly, there's so many whys, right? It's connecting to your creator. It's taking time out from this busy world. It's testing your limits. It's figuring life out. It's getting away from life's busyness. There's a lot of whys, but I'm as I said, the project is forcing me to think through them and experience them all.
Did you have any past experience with storytelling previous to this?
No, not really. I'm a scientist by training, so I have an analytical mind, and so I've done a lot of writing analytically. But I think I've also got a creative side to me, which is what you're seeing as an expression of blood origins. And I guess storytelling is just like hunting is in my blood. My grandfather was a storyteller; he was a big writer, and I like to, when I see something in my brain, just like with the restoration work I've done and science that I've done, then I can articulate that pretty well, and I can frame it out, and I can figure out what this looks like, and I can build it out. So yeah, I wasn't a storyteller per se, but I think it's just naturally there. It's naturally in most of us, actually.
Yeah, it just takes a little practice and cultivating.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. Every day you just got to keep practicing, and it gets better and better and better.
That's right. Use it or lose it. And, just like our muscles, I'm a physical education teacher, and if you don't use your body's going to wither away.
Yep.
But we are all given these natural gifts, and it's just a matter of what people use and what ones they choose not to.
That's right.
So where is Blood Origins going from here? You are in, 3 seasons now?
Yeah. We're about to finish season 3 at the end of September. We're going to have a big September, 5 days time. We've got a bunch of stuff lining up for the final push to the end of season 3. Then season 4 launches on the heels of season 3. Probably 4 weeks later, we're going to launch season 4. And season 4 is going to be our most diverse season to date. It's going to punch people in the face like we like to do.
Can you give any teasers?
No.
You got to keep your cards close to your chest.
Let's just say the first 4 episodes that lead up to she's even all the way through February it's just banger after banger after banger, man. What I will say is this: it showcases the diversity of our hunting community like we haven't done before, that I've always been striving to do. So you're going to see major mainstreamers, you're going to see strong females, you're going to see veterans, you're going to see African Americans. It's going to be super diverse. And then we will drop the buffalo hunt from Australia as our journey in season 4, called Dreamtime. Sweet.
I can't wait. What has been some of your favorite episodes that you've put out?
Oh, everyone asks that question, and it's like, how do you pick, right? It's like, how do you pick your favorite child?
Yep.
No, it's just so, like, I've used Cuz Strickland a number of times just because my dad was with me, and my dad really didn't understand blood origins, and my dad hadn't hunted in probably 55 years. And we went up and we filmed Cuz, and Cuz knew my dad was coming, and he said, does your dad want to hunt? And so we got my dad a non-resident hunting license, and I hunted with my dad probably for the first time and probably the last time ever. And he shot a doe and shot her straight through the heart. Hadn't pulled a trigger in 55 years. I was in the blind with him. Cuz was with us, was exceptional. So that makes that story hold a special place. Yeah, holds a special place in my heart. Jim Shockey's story was awesome. We were great. He was gracious enough to invite us back to dinner at his house, and we went and pulled shrimp traps and crab traps for dinner that night with him. We've rocked up at the door of a South Korean female in Detroit, Michigan, Joanna Dart, who trusted us implicitly. 3 random guys showed up to her mother's house, and we walked into the woods in the back 40 and sat her down on a tree and filmed her story, which is crazy. She tells me later, she was like, man, my friends thought I was crazy, letting these guys take me into the woods, quote unquote. There's been such good stories, man. And
I share one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Is so Jason Hairston, the founder of Kuyu, was for me someone who, I didn't really know much about him ultimately, or like have any true connection, but our lives somewhat paralleled. We both played college football, and actually he played at UC Davis, which knocked us out of the national playoffs one of the years I was playing in college. And so hearing that he was a football player, I played football, I fell in love with hunting, even though it was something that he already did. But ultimately, which was the last thing that really connected me to him, is that his boy's name is Cash. And this last September, right before my first archery elk hunt, my wife and I were pregnant, and we already had our name chosen, and it was Cash. And it was right after my wife miscarried that Jason took his life. And it really, like, dude, shook me to my core. I was like, man, I never even got a chance to meet this man, but his life impacted mine. And so seeing his story and watching you tell it, I don't know, it still like makes me emotional right now.
Oh yeah, same here, dude. Jason there's been a lot, we've been fortunate to interact with the hunting industry for the last 3 years, and there's a lot of people that talk. And that's all they do, is talk. Jason was one of the few that said he was going to do something, and he did it. And that's why he meant so much to us and our project, is that he delivered, man. He was an action guy. He loved our project. He said he was going to do X, Y, and Z, and he did X, Y, and Z for us. And, September the 4th is coming up. That's the date that it's almost his anniversary. And we've got a couple of videos ready. So, our project, one of the things that is near to my heart is I'm going to keep the legacy of Jason Hairston alive through our project. And, one of the questions that we ask people in all of our episodes, depending on if they knew him or not, is that we ask them, what does Jason Hairston mean to you? And so we capture that piece of content, and we're just going to keep doing that and keep pushing it out and remembering him and remembering what he did for our project. And, if you go to his Instagram and you go to his bio still has our episode right there.
Yeah, that's incredible. I'll tell you, it's very interesting being on social media nowadays and then having someone pass away, but their social media lives on. It's really interesting, a little harrowing. When he, I think his wife took over his account, and when she posted, I was like,
yeah, that's weird. Like, you're hitting it super weird too. Like, I've had Jason Hairston like one of my posts. I'm like, what? Oh,
I don't know about this.
Yeah, it's weird, man. It's super weird. No, but it's all good. He's, he meant a lot to us, and he's going to continue to mean a lot to us. And we've got a couple of duck call pieces that are coming out that we filmed with Chad Mendes and Hunter Strickland last year that we're going to push out here next month or so.
That's awesome. Well, how can Soulful Hunter help Blood Origins and help Robbie? What can we do to support the cause and the hunting narrative?
Send a check.
Come on now, we all need some funds. Yeah, are you a nonprofit?
No, we're not. We sit under an LLC.
Yeah. But it's got to be expensive to tell all these stories and still try to carry a full-time job.
Yeah, it is. And my wife gave me an ultimatum in 2019 that Blood Origins needed to be sustainable, and that I was not allowed to raid our savings account any longer. And so far, so good in 2019. So it's not cheap, but it's important. And so we've invested, and slowly but surely we're growing, and every day we grow, and every day we touch new people, and every day we hear from new people. So we got big plans in 2020. We got big plans for the rest of 2019. But 2020, I'm changing. Blood Origins, we've done. The last thing Blood Origins can do is the worst thing Blood Origins can do is become stale.
Right.
And people see the same things over and over again. So what we've done is we've engaged the help of a number of production companies. So the foundation of a Blood Origins episode is going to remain the same, but the flavor and the feel is going to start being different. And we've already started with the last episode we dropped of Christian Puglisi, who was the Danish Michelin star chef. That was done by a new production company. And so you're still seeing things are going to be a little different, start feeling a little different. And then as we go into 2020, I've got some ideas of how do we start expanding our realm of the why, and I'll give you a little teaser and start blurring the lines of hunting.
What do you mean by that?
I can't tell you.
Ooh, hey. So you're going to have to subscribe and stay tuned.
Yeah, so what can you do? Just keep doing what you're doing, man. We just need to be, this isn't, this is the other thing that it's important to say. Blood Origins is not we're not a, how do I say this? We're not a turf project, right? Our project is about narrative changing content. And we're all about others being narrative changes too. And so just you doing what you're doing with the Soulful Hunter and just putting out good narrative and good content is pushing good content and good narrative out into the community and out into those that are non-hunters that interact with you and interact with your platform.
So tell me this. In your opinion, what is the number one way to recruit people into hunting?
How long have we been on this? How long do we still want to be on this? Man, I don't know, man. I think R3 is the new way, is the new mode, and I agree with R3. I think that there is a place for investment in youth education into hunting. But what happens is when they become 16, 17, 18 and go off to college, that almost sometimes gets lost, right? So you've done all this investment and you lose it versus investing, I think, and this is where R3 comes full circle, is the recruitment of you, Johnny, me, Robbie, right?
Yeah.
And what you're doing is you're not just recruiting me, and when you're recruiting me and my family, and so you're getting like a four times multiplier immediately by recruiting me into the fold. The other thing that you get by recruiting me into the fold is as you probably well know, a late adult onset hunter really understands why they start hunting.
Mm-hmm.
If you ask a 6-year-old, why did you start hunting? They're like, yeah, because I want to go kill something. It's likely the answer. Or 2, hey, because daddy told me I needed to go hunting. Or I wanted to go hunting with daddy. That late adult onset hunter knows his why. So when you bring that person into the fold, that why is going to be translated into anybody else that they start recruiting up into the hunting lifestyle and into the community, which includes their kids and potentially other late adult onset hunters around them.
Do you think it's more around the story or the food to get people hooked?
I think it's more than that. I think there's a couple more ideas there. I think that there's a big locavore movement that is tied to food as a late adult onset hunter. I don't know so much about the story. I don't think anyone comes to hunting to tell a story. They'll come to it for the food. They'll come to it for the adventure. They'll come to it for a myriad of reasons.
I guess with the story, I meant the adventure. You know, you do things for
Okay.
the what it is. So that's good. You know, I had a conversation with Eric Dinger. He's the
Yeah,
founder of Powder
how to
Hook.
hook. Yeah,
Yeah, and he asked me, and I asked him, what what's the best way to recruit hunters? And
what
he
did he
thought
say?
about like wild game feeds, and I was like, I think it's more about building community. You know, getting people involved and giving them a place to feel growth, have gains, and be accepted and loved. And he was like, huh. But everything has its place. You know, not everything's black and white. There are shades of gray that we have to be able to fill the void and bridge the gap for people, and to make sure that hunting is around for generations.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah. So, Robbie, how can people get a hold of you, or how can they find Blood Origins?
Yeah, just put Blood Origins into any of your social media platforms. Just Blood Origins, not Blood Oranges. Origins. And YouTube Blood Origins, Amazon Prime Blood Origins, Mossio Go Blood Origins, Waypoint TV Blood Origins. We're everywhere.
That is awesome. And all your stuff is free, which is something that's
Absolutely
really
free.
different in the hunting world.
Yep, absolutely free. If people want to send me checks, they can.
Yeah, I was going to say, have you had any sponsors try to get on board with you to help promote? Or is there anyone with a big, I don't know, big background or big platform there to support you?
Yeah, I think, we've had a couple of partners come on board. Nothing major yet, but there are a couple of big hooks in the water that we are constantly working. And yeah, we're just being patient right now. I'm not interested in whoring the project out to 30 different companies. I'm interested in
Right.
working with 2 to 5 solid companies that understand what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it.
Yeah.
And that's all we need. I have a great day job that I don't intend leaving. I love what I do. And so all I need is, a couple of partners that allow the project to be sustainable on an annual basis and keep doing what we're doing, and maybe grow a little bit more. But yeah, we've got some opportunities out there, and then, the more mainstream individuals we can get, the better the project will become. That's the ultimate goal, is to really reach across into the mainstream audience and start picking stories out of there, and not stick with the choir that we've started with. There's nothing wrong with the choir.
So here's a question for you, because I'm not familiar with all your episodes just yet. Have you had any politicians on your shows?
I have not had a politician yet.
What about reaching out to senators and congressmen or women, or ultimately president? Donald Trump's son is a big proponent of the Second Amendment and hunting.
Yeah.
Is there blood origins that can be told there, or where
For sure.
is it that we can have some big impact in people that have their hands on our legislation?
Yeah, I think that my ideal scenario would be to do a Blood Origins episode on Donald Trump Jr., and then we follow that up with a very blue individual that likes to hunt too.
Yeah.
And then you're like, man, this idea of hunting is not a red and blue idea. It's an American idea.
Yes. Thank you. The hunting is very political because people make it political, but ultimately it is about human survival and human thriving, the ability to thrive in where we are in our environment.
Yep.
I'm a believer that God gave us dominion over this earth and over the animals and all this, and we're going to treat it with respect because we're all his creation. But ultimately, I'm going to do what is best for my family and also feeds the fire within my own soul.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Robbie, you are a champion, man. I'm so honored that you've been a part of the Soulful Hunter podcast and you've been able to join us. Are there any parting thoughts or last words that you'd like to get in before we just bring this to a close?
No, man, I appreciate the opportunity, and I hope I didn't waffle too much throughout the last hour. But yeah, I just appreciate the opportunity, and keep doing what you're doing.
Oh, man. Well, same to you. I'm honored that you would even get on and join me. You know, it's really interesting how it only takes that one time to reach out to somebody that you never know where it's going to go. Right. And I think that's where we need to be ambassadors for the hunting community, where, you know, it took me reaching out to Jana and Jana reached out to you. And then all of a sudden it's in our blood and we're connecting down the line of making these great conversations and connections. And this is where we need to be as hunters and reach out to people who do not hunt and say, hey, would you like to? What would you like to know about it? Would you like to learn? And be ambassadors for what we love.
Exactly.
So listeners, all you listeners out there, take a stand in what you believe in, because if you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything. And it's time to take a stand for what has changed your life and ultimately allow others' lives to be changed by the primal adventure of what hunting brings. So Robbie, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you. We're super excited to see what season 4 brings, as you're going to be launching that here. And man, Robbie, you're in the family. Let's stay in contact, man. You got any big hunting plans this fall?
No, unfortunately, we've got a bunch of filming plans. So hunting's taking a backseat in 2019. It's going to come to the fold in 2020.
Well, once again, we really look forward to seeing what Blood Origins brings for season 4. You are the absolute man. Everyone, make sure to go check out Blood Origins. Also, go follow them on Instagram and be a proponent for hunting and an advocate. And as always, stay soulful, everyone. Thanks for joining us, Robbie. Have a good one.
Cheers. Thank you.
If you enjoyed today's podcast, I'd love it if you could go ahead and give this a rating as well as subscribe. Also, you can check us out on Instagram under the Soulful Hunter podcast. Make sure to tag us in pictures and posts and use the hashtag Soulful Hunter. To find out more about the Soulful Hunter podcast, go to soulfulhunter.com and be sure to follow the podcast, as we are going to be bringing you a lot of great information, insight, and changing lives through primal adventure. I look forward to connecting with you on the next episode. Stay tuned and stay soulful.